Ah!
Why do people commit crimes? Human nature is complex and multifaceted. Every action has its own reason. This time we will not discuss people with mental health issues and their propensity for violence. We will also exclude military personnel, those whose work is directly related to the destruction of enemies. It seems that the main motives for life-threatening actions are material gain, revenge, exceeding the limits of necessary self-defense, and random incidents. Most crimes occur in everyday life during conflicts and disputes, when it seemed that everything was fine. However, these acts of violence are not the cause, but the consequence of the degradation of the human spirit, leaving an indelible mark. On the morning of January 12, 2019, a message was received about the death of 65-year-old Michael Redlick. A well-known in his circles former head of the NBA and the Memphis Grizzlies and a respected professor at the University of Central Florida, he was initially believed to have died of a heart attack. However, upon arrival of emergency services, it became clear that Mr. Redlick had died from a stab wound to the chest. Various versions were considered, including self-harm. Later, forensic experts determined that there had been a criminal deprivation of life. After some time, the perpetrator was identified. The person who contributed to Michael's death turned out to be his beloved wife. By June 2022, she appeared in court. However, this story is not that simple. She did not admit guilt in the intentional crime and often changed her testimony. The legal battle between the prosecution and the defense was long and tense. In the end, the court's verdict was unexpected for everyone. What really happened in the suburb of Winter Park in Florida, USA? Who is the real victim, and could the tragedy have been prevented? Let's figure it out together. 46-year-old Danielle Redlick is sitting in the dock. The accused is short and thin. Her brown hair has noticeably turned gray either due to the lack of access to a hairdresser after spending about 3 years in custody, or gray hair evidence of her true experiences and stress. Until 2019, she was an ordinary working American woman, a mother of 2 beautiful children. A specialist in multimedia communications, she was not particularly famous. However, after the crime against her husband, her name often flashed in the media. This happens when the dirty laundry of seemingly respectable spouses is aired in public. Danielle was born in 1976 in Florida. After some time, her family moved to Cleveland, Ohio. Her childhood was typical in many ways. She grew up kind and well-mannered, with a creative nature. Danielle was the eldest child in the family. As she grew older, her value of beauty increased. She entered Valencia College, where she received an associate degree in fine arts. Later, she was accepted to the psychology department of Baldwin Wallace University. In 1996, Danielle's mother, Caitlin Aquino, remarried. However, the marriage was short-lived, lasting only 2 years, after which Caitlin died of cancer. It turned out that she had been battling breast cancer for a long time. Thanks to her husband's comprehensive insurance, she received quality medical care, which was the main reason for legalizing their marriage. Unfortunately, the treatment ultimately did not give the desired result. After the death of his wife, the man became not only a widower, but also a real father to her children. Since it was difficult for him to raise them alone, he asked for help from Caitlin, his eldest daughter. At that time, 22-year-old Danielle lived on her own, but responded to the request. Thus, after Caitlin's death, Danielle, her brother and sister, as well as their stepfather Michael Redlick, found themselves under one roof. Yes, you heard correctly. The same Michael who later became Danielle's husband and suffered on a winter evening in 2019. At first, their relationship was based on friendship. Danielle took care of the younger children and worked part-time at a bar at night. Michael was building a career in professional sports, recruiting players. He became very attached to the children, who became family to him. He also felt comfortable with Danielle. Over time, she saw him as a reliable support. Despite the 20-year age difference, their interaction was easy and natural. Gradually, the man and the woman became closer. Neither age nor status bothered them. However, at first, Danielle did not want to advertise their relationship to her family and hid it for some time. With his new partner, Michael felt younger and more energetic, and she felt loved and protected. Since he had good connections, he easily found her a new job at an advertising agency. In addition, he had a high income, and he devoted all his free time to his family. In general, everything was going well for both. After some time, Mr. Redlick received a tempting job offer. He was invited to become vice president of corporate sales for the Memphis Grizzlies basketball club. However, the new job required moving to another state. Without thinking, he asked Danielle to go with him. But she hesitated. Danielle did not want to change her usual way of life, and besides, she was still studying, so she refused. But their relationship continued at a distance, and the lovers often saw each other. One day, he showed her the house he had bought for them, and she was impressed. The cottage was located in a picturesque place near the Mississippi River. The area was quiet and cozy. Eventually, Danielle decided to move in and live together. To make sure she had no doubts, he found her an interesting job in the radio industry. Danielle later recalled that at first, everything was perfect. Only Michael's job later changed things. Many years later, during Danielle's trial, her 15-year-old daughter Jaden testified. She spoke about how Michael was a great father who did so much for his family. Together with his 8-year-old brother, Sawyer, they attended one of the best schools, hoping to build a career in sports thanks to their father's encouragement and support in enrolling them in sports programs. Jaden was close to her father, which could not be said about her mother, whom she considered hysterical, manipulative, and sometimes toxic. The young lady believed that Danielle provoked all the conflicts at home, while Michael tried to keep the family in peace and quiet. But was everything really as the eldest daughter perceived it? And what caused discord in what seemed to be a happy and close-knit family? Mr. Redlick's new position brought increased responsibility and stress. He had a difficult relationship with his management. This affected him. He became very tense and tired. As a result, Michael turned to alcohol to relax and distract himself. Over time, this became a daily occurrence. He often stayed late, returning home drunk and angry. The tension in the house was palpable. Danielle tried to support her husband, understanding his condition. After talking with her, it seemed that he calmed down and promised to stop. But his promises were short-lived. One time, Michael missed a dinner they had planned together, and it wasn't the first time. But this time, they had specifically arranged to spend the evening together. Danielle was very upset and said that if he couldn't make time for her, he should have told her so she could make other plans. As she headed for the door, she made a bad joke that struck a nerve with Michael. He stood in the doorway and punched her in the face. The blow was so hard that she staggered. Then she noticed that her clothes and the floor were splattered with blood. In shock, she pulled away from her husband, who began crying and apologizing. Clearly upset, Michael immediately tried to make amends. He took his wife to a sports doctor he knew and explained what had happened. The doctor examined the unfortunate victim and administered first aid, then recommended that she see a dentist and a plastic surgeon, as the injuries were quite severe. Danielle even had a chipped front tooth. The next day, Michael threw a memorable dinner, was very attentive and caring. Undoubtedly, his wife forgave him and did not report the incident anywhere. The state had a fairly strict law on domestic violence, so Ms. Redlick felt sympathy for her husband and decided not to create additional problems for him. In fact, this was not the first alarm bell. Danielle had encountered similar behavior before. The incident occurred when they lived together in Cleveland. At a concert, Danielle talked with her ex-boyfriend, which made Michael jealous. On the way home, he made several sarcastic comments about this. Danielle responded in the same spirit. Unexpectedly, he hit her, then immediately apologized, noting that he did it because she hurt his feelings. Danielle forgave her partner, blaming herself too. Over time, the incident was forgotten. After all, anything can happen in a relationship. In 2003, the Redlicks had their first child, a daughter named Jaden. A year later, the couple decided to formalize their relationship. It was a bright period in their lives. Everything was going well. However, Michael still faced problems at work. The management changed, and he was unable to get the promotion he had hoped for. 7 years later, the family was replenished with a son named Sawyer. The parents were completely absorbed in raising children, if not for one but Michael's work. The tension grew, and he began to drink again. This led to more frequent conflicts. During one argument, he grabbed Danielle by the throat and pressed her against the wall, which scared her. This time, his wife could not tolerate rude behavior. She packed her things, took the children, and moved in with relatives. It is worth noting that they initially did not approve of the marriage, but over time they came to terms with it. Michael repeatedly visited her, apologizing and asking her to come home. After some time, their relationship was restored. The following years were unstable. The Redlicks moved several times. The head of the family was offered a job in California, where they lived for about 5 years. This period can hardly be called successful. The man again struggled with his problems and continued to abuse alcohol. There came a time when both spouses were out of work and living on savings. In 2014, another move was on the horizon, this time to Indiana. However, the prospects were promising. In order to find a new home and settle things, the man went ahead. Danielle stayed in California with the children. They needed time to sell the old property and things. Constant moving was also tiring. The children had a hard time adapting to the rapidly changing environment. The whole process took a year. During this time, the family's financial situation improved. However, the marital relationship underwent changes. Distance and infrequent meetings affected them. Danielle and Michael became distant from each other and barely communicated. When the spouses finally reunited, they faced new problems. At some point, Danielle began to suspect her husband of infidelity. He became unusually cold and distant, the former passion faded. However, Michael found the strength to admit that his age and health were to blame. He had been embarrassed to mention it before, afraid of losing his young wife. But Danielle was grateful for his honesty and supported him as before. After numerous attempts with medications, the couple decided to undergo a course of hormonal injections. Testosterone injections helped Michael rejuvenate physically and mentally. He seemed to become younger, regaining his former energy and vigor. Along with this, his aggressiveness increased. One evening, while watching a movie together, Michael fell asleep. Danielle went upstairs to rest. The next morning, he walked into the bathroom while she was brushing her teeth and hit her on the head. He justified his actions by saying that she had not woken him up the night before. She replied that she was tired of this and was leaving. This only made him angrier, and he began to strangle her. Poor Danielle could not defend herself and began to lose consciousness. At one point, she thought she was dying. After a while, Mrs. Redlick opened her eyes and saw her husband standing over her, frightened and confused, begging for forgiveness. All Danielle could do was crawl away silently. After this incident, they continued to live in the same house and raise their children together. But from that moment on, their relationship changed dramatically. Apparently, a point of no return was reached. The man began to drink more often, and conflicts in the house became more frequent, even over trifles. The number of cases when Michael's dissatisfaction escalated into physical aggression increased. However, the woman did not leave him. Despite her dissatisfaction with the situation and resentment towards her husband, she continued to love him deeply. The situation also affected Danielle. She became nervous and irritable, withdrawn. To distract herself, she took up photography. However, their family still looked respectable, as most of their disagreements did not go beyond the home. By the end of 2014, the Redlicks finally settled in Florida. This time, Michael decided to change his career direction, tired of the constant stress. He took a position as the Director of External Relations and Partnerships at the University of Central Florida and began teaching. Although his income was less than in the NBA, the work brought him pleasure and stability. At first, the family rented an apartment, but a year later they bought their own property in the picturesque Winter Park area. Their family home was impressive. The house was designed in a Mediterranean style and had a huge area. Danielle preferred the attic floor, which served as her refuge. She often spent nights there, especially when Michael had fits of anger. Testosterone injections rejuvenated him and restored their intimate life, but even in intimate moments he could be rough. Their relationship remained tense and unstable. Against this background, Danielle developed an alcohol addiction. While Michael worked and provided for the family, Danielle ran the household and looked after the children, becoming increasingly withdrawn. Numerous arguments eventually led to the couple separating in 2016. Despite this, Michael continued to see the children and support them financially by paying their bills. By this time, Danielle had found a job at a school. New acquaintances helped her to overcome her depression, and her responsibilities restored her independence. However, she continued to see Michael. He could come and go as he pleased. During one of these days, another argument broke out, after which Danielle ended up in the hospital with a concussion. She again remained silent and did not tell the truth about what had happened, fearing that this would cause problems for her husband. But this time, Michael took her silence for granted. During interrogation, Danielle admitted that something out of the ordinary had happened in early October 2016. Her husband had tried to run her over with his car. She was only saved by the fact that she had managed to jump into the bushes. After that, Danielle went to the police station. However, when detectives began asking her about the incident in detail, she changed her mind and left. The reason was still the same. The couple later reconciled and moved back in together. However, this decision proved fatal for both. Around 9 a.m. on January 12, 2019, a 911 call came in. On the other end of the line, a woman identified herself as Danielle Redlick and reported that her husband Michael had died of a heart attack. When the rescue team arrived and entered the house, they immediately smelled a strong smell of cleaning product. At the entrance to the living room, the team found a bucket of pink water. Behind it, a scene unfolded like something out of a thriller. A lifeless man lay on the floor in a pool of blood. It was clear that the unfortunate man had not died of a heart attack, as his wife claimed, but from a penetrating stab wound. The woman who made the call was also found with cuts on her wrists. Paramedics administered first aid before taking her to the hospital. Following them, the police began an investigation. When law enforcement examined the scene, they were certain that Michael Redlick's life had been taken. It was unlikely that he could have inflicted such a fatal injury on himself. Later, forensic examination confirmed that traces of blood in the house belonged to the deceased. The pink liquid in the bucket at the entrance was nothing more than diluted blood. Someone, possibly the owner of the house herself, tried to erase the trail leading from the bedroom to the living room, indicating that the body was dragged. Despite attempts to clean up, not all evidence was destroyed. Blood spatter was found in the corners of the room and on the walls. Moreover, a large knife was lying at the entrance to the kitchen, and 3 small knives were found in the sink. Detectives were eager to talk to Danielle. So, as soon as doctors reported that her injuries were not life-threatening, she was questioned. During the interview, she repeatedly changed her story. At first, she claimed that she thought her husband had died of heart disease. Later, she said that he had committed suicide after an argument. However, experts refuted her claims. Such a wound is difficult to inflict on oneself, and people who intend to end their lives usually choose a simpler and less painful way. An autopsy showed that Michael died from blood loss. With timely medical attention, his life could have been saved. In addition, his left eye was cut. Toxicology tests also revealed high levels of alcohol in his system. The investigation showed that a few days before the incident, the couple had an argument, which their eldest daughter witnessed. Michael had been drinking and burst into the bathroom where Danielle was hiding. However, their daughter Jaden intervened, taking the bottle away from him. After that, Danielle left the house and returned when her husband fell asleep. According to the girl, this was the first time she saw such a surge of anger in her father, for which he later apologized many times. She continued to claim that he was a loving and caring father, while insisting that her mother was the one who started the conflicts. The next day, the couple reconciled. Michael invited his wife and children to a football match. However, according to witnesses, Danielle seemed upset and barely communicated. In the evening, the parents took the children to a sleepover with friends and were left alone. Later, Danielle stopped at McDonald's and returned home around 10:30 p.m. When she entered the house, she found her husband drunk. During dinner, Danielle received a text message from an unknown man. Michael saw this, took a bite of his hamburger and spat it at his wife. He then attacked her, trying to strangle her. In self-defense, Danielle grabbed the first thing she could get her hands on, the knife, and stabbed him in the chest. He fell and began to bleed profusely. According to the defendant, she immediately called emergency services, but accidentally dialed the wrong number. Her actions were later confirmed during the investigation. In a state of shock, she lay down next to Michael and fell asleep until the morning. At least, that is how Danielle explained the 11 hours of inaction. When asked by the prosecution why she lied during the emergency call and subsequent questioning, Ms. Redlick explained that she was afraid. She was worried that no one would believe that she acted in self-defense. There was reason for this fear. Shortly before the incident, she was involved in a fight with friends. When the police arrived, she resisted, trying to bite one of them. She also refused to cooperate with the investigation, which led to charges of disturbing the peace and resisting arrest. Danielle was on probation for about a year. It was also determined that the cuts on her wrists were self-inflicted. She claimed that she was trying to commit suicide due to emotional distress, but the nature of the injuries indicated otherwise. They were superficial and not life-threatening. Therefore, her claims were not believed. Investigators also found that Danielle was far from a model of behavior. After learning about Michael's infidelity, she registered on an online dating site where she communicated with men and cheated in retaliation. Her profile stated that she was single and not in a relationship. An analysis of the countless messages between Michael and Danielle revealed that she still loved her husband. After learning about his infidelities, she felt betrayed and disappointed. She also learned that Michael was planning to leave her, despite the fact that he seemed remorseful and wanted to fix the relationship. Danielle explained that she had a hard time understanding and accepting her husband's actions. She was heartbroken that she had devoted the best years of her life to a man who did not value her. The prosecution used this information against her. The prosecutor claimed that the crime was premeditated, committed in a fit of rage because she could not forgive his infidelity and impending divorce. Like Mr. Redlick, she was also prone to angry outbursts, which was confirmed by their neighbors, who noted that the couple often argued loudly, escalating into physical confrontations. Danielle's attorney argued that her actions were motivated by self-defense and a history of emotional and physical abuse. Relatives who often witnessed their fights confirmed that Michael was rude and emotionally abusive. They also knew that he often physically abused and humiliated her, although he never did so in their presence. Some family members reported that Danielle was nervous and short-tempered, which only emerged after several years of marriage. The prosecution latched onto the fact that she essentially left her husband to die, indicating that she was biding her time. They showed that she had logged into a dating app the night of the incident, suggesting premeditation, driven by hatred and resentment, perhaps even financial gain. After the divorce, Danielle stood to lose some of her accumulated wealth. At the time of Michael's death, her net worth was estimated at $1.2 million. It was also noted that she repeatedly changed her testimony, apparently trying to confuse the investigation, and may have tampered with evidence. However, the defense insisted that Mr. Redlick was a manipulator and predator. After the death of his first wife, he relentlessly pursued his stepdaughter and molded the young woman to his needs. During the investigation, the prosecution offered the defendant a plea deal for manslaughter, which would have resulted in only 10 years in prison. However, she refused. Despite the fact that if convicted of first or second-degree murder, she faced life in prison. She continued to insist on her innocence. The outcome of the trial was unexpected for everyone. On July 17, 2022, the jury returned its verdict. They found Danielle Redlick not guilty of voluntary manslaughter because they believed that her actions were indeed committed in self-defense. However, she was found guilty of falsifying evidence, for which she received a suspended sentence of 5 years. 3 years already served were counted. On August 5, 2022, the day the verdict was announced, the defendant was released in the courtroom. What do you think? Was the verdict fair? Or was the jury skillfully misled into believing that the killing of Michael Danielle was calculated and cold-blooded? Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel. There are many shocking stories ahead.